Former president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, says he may re-enter the world of politics if his daughter, the Philippines' vice president, is impeached over alleged misuse of funds. When Duterte became president in 2016, he launched a violent war on drugs that led to the deaths of thousands of people, saying, quote, "If someone's child is a drug addict, kill them yourselves," end quote. 2 days later, supporters of a memorial honoring the victims of Duterte's regime broke ground in Manila. Duterte's bloody legacy is the subject of a new book titled Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in my country. The New York Times just named it one of the 10 best books of 2023. And its author, journalist Patricia Evangelista, joins us now. Pat, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on all the acclaim. I mentioned top 10 of the year from New York Times. Time Magazine called it one of its books of the year. And I think the title is so striking, we should explain that first. Some People Need Killing. Where does that come from? What does it mean?
Well, it's actually not a quotation from former President Duterte. In 2018, I was interviewing vigilantes who were accused of outsourcing. No, I was interviewing vigilantes who police had been outsourcing murder to. And I was in a room with a vigilante, and he said he was a religious man. He said he was a good man. And he said that he killed drug addicts because he wanted to protect the future of his children. And I asked him how he squared that with this idea of being a good person. And he said, "I'm not a bad guy. I'm not all bad. It's just some people need killing." And that reverberates across my country, and it did on the campaign, during the campaign of President Rodrigo Duterte, because Duterte told a story. He took every fear and every grievance, fueled by decades of failed expectations, and then he gave the enemy a name. He called it the scourge of illegal drugs, and he said, "I will kill to destroy it." Now, it's easy to dismiss the language of a politician and say it's just rhetoric, but we can't afford to do that. We've learned this across history. When a strong man says, "I will kill," he means it. When a strong man says, "I will suppress the press," he means it. When a strong man demeans a woman, he means it. And when he uses words as threats, he will act on those words when he has power. And that's what happened with us. And the price is a little too high, and the stakes are too high to ignore the language. And I'll tell you one story. That price was paid by an 11-year-old girl. Her name is Love Love. And love was the last word her father said when a vigilante shot a bullet through his temple. And then Love Love attempted to beg the vigilante to say, "Don't shoot my mother." And the vigilante stood up in front of her, raised the gun barrel, aimed it at her mother, and said, "Duterte kami. We are Duterte." And then he emptied the magazine. It is a language from top to bottom.
So I want to go back to something you said, because that probably stopped people in their tracks, which is that you're talking about drug addicts. You're not just talking about going after drug cartels to stop the drug trade, to stop the flow of drugs. That's one thing that a lot of governments do, of course, not in the way he did it, but that they do. Talking about wiping out all drug addicts, as if the drug problem would go away if we could just kill all of those people. So let me ask you, who are the vigilantes? Who carried out this order? They weren't just military, they weren't just police, they weren't government. They were people who took his words and acted on their own.
He was an inspiration. And the police have killed at least 6,000. In every instance of a killing, they claim that the drug addict, the drug dealer, the criminal, the suspect fought back. And there's always a gun on the ground beside the dead body. Allegedly, the man had pulled out a gun, and in defense of their lives, the language they use in police reports is, "We were forced to retaliate." But the vigilantes themselves, they say, at least the men I have spoken to, they say that they believe Rodrigo Duterte, that addicts are terrible people. It was easy to demonize and dehumanize, to take language like that and bring it down to the street. So they did, and they still think they're good men. It's just they're doing a job.
So he's out of power for now. We'll see if he finds his way back in. Have these death squads gone away? Is this effort over now?
people are still dying on the street. Journalists are still dying. You don't have a man standing on a podium saying, kill them all anymore. But the impunity stands. The fear is on the streets. Journalists wonder if it is dangerous to write what they write. So the drug war at the height of it is not the same anymore, but the repercussions will run through generations of children who have walked down the street, saw a body and said, this is normal. The terrible is ordinary now.
Jonathan Lemire is in Washington with a question for you, Pat. John?
Patricia, good to see you. Congrats on the book. I was in Manila with President Trump on a trip once where he praised these extrajudicial killings of Duterte, and we know he has voiced at least some thought of having a similar policy here in the United States, at least with drug dealers, maybe not drug users. Talk to us, though, about the Philippines of today, where things stand with Duterte, and what possible comeback might he have?
Well, President Duterte does like to talk, and he does like his audiences, and he does like the applause, which I think is familiar to many people. There is word that maybe some sort of reckoning. The International Criminal Court has put the Philippines under investigation. There's also some word that President Duterte may run if he decides to. But right now, our president is the former dictator's son, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. His vice president is Rodrigo Duterte's daughter, Sara Duterte. So it's not as if a comeback is necessary for President Duterte. His family is in power.
Let's talk about the people who follow him and how he had such a strong following. I read this about Joy. An example of a Duterte believer. Joy's brother and cousins were deep into their drug addiction. They stole from the family to buy meth. Quote, Joy was angry all the way to the day when Rodrigo Duterte finally announced he was running for president. She saw him on television. It was like seeing Jesus. She ran home whenever her husband messaged her that Duterte was on the air, heading straight to the television to hear Jesus speak. She wept every time, replayed every interview, every speech, every clip she could. Jesus would save her. Jesus would deliver her. Jesus understood. Joy also knew what the second D in DDS meant. She was not afraid. Talk about how transfixed many people in the Philippines were.
They said, we are Duterte. Duterte kami. So the wonderful thing about Duterte, and I say this as a storyteller, is that he was able to make himself every man, so that every man could be Rodrigo Duterte. He could be hero, he can be Messiah, he can be anything. And he's not special in that. There are charismatic men all over the world who will say outrageous things, who will say dangerous things, but not dangerous enough. They might say, take back the country. They might say, build a wall. They might say, destroy the addicts and protect the future for the children. And then the dial turns a little bit. And maybe they'll say things that are a little more dangerous, but more acceptable, like kill the addicts, kill the journalists, maybe shoot the shoplifters, maybe kill the federal judges. And in the end, we realize, we know that it can happen anywhere, that it is happening everywhere, and that the Philippines is a cautionary tale for what happens when an autocrat can blow a dog whistle and is charismatic enough for the world to follow. And when that happens, people like me, we stand on the street, we count the bodies, we look at the body with his head wrapped in packing tape and a sign beside him saying drug dealer or drug addict. And we ask, how did people let this happen? And then your autocrat will say, all I did was tell a story.
And we ought to take those stories very seriously and take their words very seriously. Just a breathtaking book, so well told. It is titled Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in my country with, as she says, warnings around the world as well. Patricia Evangelista, congratulations on the success of the book. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.